I arrived in Paris in late 2004. Basically came here to work on a novel. I had been living in San Francisco for just about 10 years. And basically, by the time I came here, I was having a mental breakdown with not just my life, but kind of like a real illness that was surrounding this room that I'd been living in, that I decided it was time. I had to sit down and tell this story.
I could follow my whole life's track, I'd still be here at the crossroads, dear. My broken heart has never left. In
actuality, I'd just come away from a pretty privileged life in San Francisco, skateboarding, everything I thought I wanted, but it kind of just crashed in on me. I got really just in a bad spot, and at the same time, something was happening there that I wasn't aware of. And it was shortly after I discovered what was happening in this room that I left it.
Nothing ever makes it home that takes the Blue Star Highway.
It does take place in this place that was skateboarding at the time. It was like the early 90s. It was like .com boom. People were coming from all over the world to San Francisco. At the time, it was like a real center for skateboarding. I had come out from North Carolina. I was hitchhiking. My friend Brian lived in this flat. He was a skateboarder. He was like, yeah, sleep on my floor. So I started sleeping on his floor. This house was like a 3-bedroom flat in San Francisco. And basically off from the kitchen, there was a door that was just sealed off. But by the geometry of the house, you knew there was something back there. And one day we were like, let's open this door and see what's in here. And it was just the biggest room in the house. And it was filled with trash almost to the ceiling. The guys that were living in the house at the time, they basically were like, hey, if you guys want to live in there, $50 a month, you can live in there. So we were like, we didn't have any place to stay, you know what I mean? We were like, cool. So by the time we cleared the whole room out, like you could see the earth below San Francisco because the floorboards were burnt, the sheetrock falling off the walls. But basically this room was a room with no windows. And we renovated it the best we could, put up some paint, some sheetrock, some bunks, and we moved in. Like I said, there was no money in skateboarding at the time, so we were piled up like thick and was paying $50 a month for the first part, and then $100. It was hard to leave. I lived in San Francisco, man. I actually came to Paris just because it was one of those places that I came to that I'd seen on my travels through skateboarding, and I fell in love with it. Everything was eye candy. It was beautiful. And on top of that, I didn't know the language, so I was really able to go into my own world in my head, which is where I wanted to be because I was gonna tell a story.
Well, there's no stronger wind than the one that blows down a lonesome railroad line. No prettier sight than looking back in a town you left behind.
I spent 6 months in Paris and I was writing, and I kind of started to freak out. I just wasn't far enough away from everything, and I ended up moving to a small village in the French countryside where I spent another year completely isolated, and that's where I completed the novel. When I first came here, I'd actually taken some French lessons, but I found that it disturbed my writing, being in a foreign country and you go out to a cafe and you just sit down, you have an idea, you start writing, and next thing you know, someone comes up behind you and starts talking about George Bush, and then, you know what I mean? So that was a real thing for me when I moved here. I didn't speak English, I didn't speak French. I didn't speak at all. I wrote a book, sat down. It wasn't like a conscious thing, I gotta be away from everyone or everything. In this village, all the women were 20 years older than me or 20 years younger. There was no bar. If I wanted to drink, I had to get on my bike and ride a half hour to the next village, or I had to plan to get drunk and go to the grocery store the 2 days it was open. It was but I never imagined that I would be one of those guys. And honestly, as soon as I wrote the words "the end," and in a matter of 48 hours, I rented a house and moved to Paris. 1 year total solitude to like, what's happening? I wrote everything by hand, and then I would come back and do my second drafts on like this machine right here. I always write by hands because I can panic and scribble as fast as I can write on paper. There's no lines. I don't want something to pop up, spell check, or tell me, first draft, you just go for it. Second draft is out of the typewriter. A lot of people think that I'm like a technophobe or a Luddite, or, I hate computers. And you know what? Computers are amazing, but they're not for writing. Computers are for editing, man. If you think you're gonna write a book on a computer, forget it, man. A Room with No Windows was written by hand probably 4 times before it ever saw a computer. I kind of just use the typewriter in the sense that not only does it force me to rewrite entire things, but it also leaves a trace. There's something really important about paper and having your work on paper. I can almost tell you what year the typewriter is by looking at the type on it. Like this machine over here, perfect, like it's a 1954 Hermes. It's in perfect condition. It's just amazing. But yeah, there's a real rhythm to it. I type like this, or occasionally get an extra finger in there, but in all honesty, man, I basically wrote a 300-page novel like this. And the original manuscript was 412, basically with 2 fingers. I wrote the last chapter of the book first. And so when I got to that chapter, it was written in hand, and I read it and I just totally panicked. I'd been writing so much in, the last 2 years that my handwriting had totally changed. It had improved. Plus the handwriting was the handwriting of this guy who was suffering from this illness at the time that had written this scrawl. And I freaked out. I got on the phone, I bought a plane ticket, and I flew back to San Francisco. My desk was still there. On the desk, threw down the paper, and I typed the last chapter in the room, man. I finished the book in the room, and I was like, really? I'm that crazy? Like, I would write all night long, and when the sun would come up, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to bed. I was just so scared I was gonna lay down and wake up in that room again, like total blackness. Like, the idea was to write my way out of that room,
Close your eyes, I'll be here in the morning. Close your eyes, I'll be here for a while.
Honestly, for me, the real purpose of the book was like I'd really gone through something. And it was also something that not only did other people weren't aware it was happening to me, but I wasn't aware until I left the room. I lived for 10 years in complete darkness. At 12 midnight, it was pitch black in that room. At 12 in the afternoon, pitch black. Just losing time and space. And on top of that, there's also this thing called SAD, which is a seasonal affective disorder. And it happens in Nordic countries where people don't get a lot of sunlight. But this was kind of happening to me, man. I wasn't getting any natural sunlight. But, after I left, it just flowed out of me. I just sat down and started writing.
Well, there's lots of things along the road I'd surely like to see. I'd like to lean into the wind, tell myself I'm free.
Skateboarding is just like such a part of me. It's a way I really chose to express myself when I was younger. Just like now I express myself through my writing or photography or whatever else I do. But my vision of the world is been given to me through skateboarding. And if you're a skateboarder and you read my novel, you're gonna see that the guy that wrote this, only skateboarders are gonna see that. The way I write, it's the way I skate. It's wild. It's like, it's out of bounds. It's balls out. It's experience. It's falling down and getting hurt. It's getting back up. I never had any kind of technical skills. I never had any finesse as a skateboarder. I was a killer, man. On a skateboard, I was a killer. I attacked things. I destroyed them. That's the way my writing is.
43! I don't like what I see going on around me. Go on out! Get some more!
A big part of the story takes place between the dynamic of the rich and the poor in San Francisco. I had such a recognizable life in skateboarding, and part of that was because I was so heavily tattooed. And a large part of this book takes place in the simple fact that I realized that by putting on like a nice shirt, a tie, and a suit, having a clean shave, I could walk through any door in that city. And I did. No questions asked. It became a thrill for me, you know, to go out with like wealthy women and be in fancy restaurants or be sitting at the symphony. And everybody thought that I was just a nice young man, whereas beneath that suit and tie, there was like this tattooed sociopath. And that was a thrill for me. I like that. Going home with some woman who was way out of your league. When she unbuttons your shirt and slides off the tie, all of a sudden she realizes she's in bed with a killer, man. I started like choosing lovers by how much sunlight their room had. Literally, like I would go home with a girl and she could be a bad lover, but like have a great window. You know what I mean? And I would come back again and again. You know what I mean? Anything to escape the room. So this book really chronicles that guy, like, and this thing that like I began to call social camouflage, and how like I really had this like secret life completely outside of skateboarding. Like I said, there's no skateboarding in this book, but I hope that like anybody who reads it or knew me or was around me at that time is going to get sucked into that time. Is going to get like, I hope the book is going to serve as some sort of time machine. If you knew me or you were around me, man, I wrote about you. I just did. The cute girl at the cafe, she's in the book, man. The guy that I bought beers from on the corner, he's in the book. You know, the girl I was dating, she's in the book. It goes all over the city. You know, I tried to make a list of just stuff I wrote about, like the Lower Haight, you know, which is definitely like, it's where the house was. It's a character, you know. 237 Fillmore, Squat and Gobble, North Beach, Columbus and Broadway, the Marina, the Mission, 16th Street Strip, man, that whole strip, the whole cleanup. The Hemlock's in here, Movida, 111 Minna, Buffalo Exchange, Polk Street, the TL is all over this thing. Phoenix Hotel, the Tunnel Top, Union Square, the Rosewood, all these things are here.
Well, now mean old Frisco, you hear the low down Santa Fe, yeah, that mean old Frisco, you hear the low down Santa Fe.
The book is like based around real stuff, but it's also important to realize too that the book is like fiction. It's not a memoir, you know. And I say that because like all the guys that I wrote about, you know, I asked them if they wanted me to change their names, and most of them didn't. You know, Ferris's name is Ferris, Ben's name is Ben, you know, and Johnny's name is Johnny. Like just real stuff, time period. Like a lot of the places that I wrote about are gone now. A lot of the people that I was writing about have moved on, myself included. Like I said, the book is like, it is a fictitious novel, but it takes place in real experiences, things that were really happening in my life and around me. And I guess the best thing about being an author and writing a book is that if something you wanted to happen in real life didn't happen, well, hell, now you're the author. You can just make it happen, you know? So I did a lot of this too, you know?
If my baby ever think of me.
San Francisco is definitely like a city that I more than love. I mean, I really, really, really adore San Francisco, and I have a lot of good friends there and family. But, you know, I lived there for 10 years, and I lived there in that time of my life where I was like a drifter and a rogue and a rough guy and, you know, whatever the hell I was, you know, and now I'm just not that guy anymore. But I mean, I love that place, but it just doesn't fit me anymore. It's like trying to put on, you know, a pair of shoes that just don't fit anymore. You love them, man, but you wear them for an hour and they just start to hurt. And you're like, why am I doing this to myself? San Francisco is so deep and clean, like inside of me, you know? That's my growing up tale, a room with no windows. It's like, you know, I grew up there in the sense that like I became a young man there, you know what I mean? Like I ran away to San Francisco, like $5 in my pocket, wild at heart, you know, hitchhiking, fist fights, jumping trains, like in and out of jail, like the craziest shit you could ever like imagine. But now like I don't feel wild, man. I feel like, I don't feel tame either, man. I just feel like, I feel settled, man. Kind of funny. That's another thing I think I've suffered a lot of criticism about is I've really been called anti-patriotic because I'm very outspoken about the way I feel about America. Anybody who knows me or knew me in that time who was in that room will tell you that there was a flag that was folded up in a little triangle, my father's death flag from the US military. You know, I'm probably as patriotic as you can get to the idea of what America is. There's not a greater country in the world. There's not a greater idea in the world. And the thing that makes that idea great is the freedom to fail. And it's failed. But you're not going to find a greater idea in the world. If that makes me anti-patriotic, then I guess I'm anti-patriotic. I'm staying here for now. I really like it here. Europe in general is just amazing. You can't find a more beautiful city than this to live in, and that's something that's become increasingly important to me. Is like as I watch charm and romance disappear. I mean, you open this door, this window, and you walk out on that balcony, and you never consider living in an American metropolis again.